Now, if the presidents who had followed Carter had stuck to his course of reducing domestic demand at the same rate of falling U.S. oil and gas production, today the U.S. would be energy independent and secure, and the U.S. would be the world's environmental leader rather than its great laggard. There would not likely have been recent Middle East wars to secure oil. Carter acted on his words. He built on the conservation and security frameworks started in the previous 3 years. The CAFE, the corporate average fuel efficiency, mandated that auto companies must increase their energy efficiency each year. So by 1985, American cars were averaging 25 miles per gallon, whereas 10 years earlier it was 15 miles per gallon. So they increased their efficiency by two-thirds. Unfortunately, the legislation did not cover SUVs, minivans, and pickup trucks, vehicles which were soon to explode in popularity. Between Carter's spring offensive in 1977 and 1986, when Reagan froze CAFE's rising standards, the U.S. economy grew by 27%, but oil demand fell by 16%. And so you can have growth at the same time that the energy use is falling. Carter's plans, of course, coincided with similar measures in Europe and Japan to cut consumption. With, of course, the oil price rose, all of these things affected reduced demand for oil. In many ways, they were too successful at that time. So what happened was there was a consequent glut in the world supply, brought us back to cheap oil. The pressure was off for the U.S. to gain energy independence through conservation. But the gains in U.S. energy independence have been dramatic. By 1985, oil imports had fallen to a little more than half the 1977 level when Carter had made his speech. Ronald Reagan overturned Carter's energy policies, which combined with lower oil and gas prices led to the steady rise in U.S. demand for oil. The consequences are today's growing oil imports in the U.S. and reduced oil independence and security. As a result, U.S. imports of petroleum began the steady rise from 20% to now about 60%. Despite his later somewhat wimpy image, Jimmy Carter had a darker side. This is not all in praise of Jimmy Carter. 3 years after his President 1977 speech, Carter declared the Persian Gulf to be of vital national interest to the United States. The Carter Doctrine declared that, quote, an attempt by any outside force to gain control of the Persian Gulf will be regarded as an assault on the vital interests of America, and such an assault will be repelled by any means necessary, including military force. Basically saying that the Middle East is American national security zone. Carter's doctrine was used by the two Bushes to justify both Gulf wars. So Carter's presidency represented the main strategies, U.S. strategies to get fossil fuels, conservation versus war. Carter may have hoped that conservation would obviate the need for aggressive U.S. military action to get other people's oil. But after the Shah of Iran's overthrow in 1978, he was as much hostage to previous U.S. actions as were the 52 American diplomats who were detained for 444 days. Ordinary Americans probably forgot that the United States, along with Britain, had overthrown a very popular president, Mohammad Mossadegh, in 1953, who had nationalized the Iranian oil industry. But the Iranians did not forget. And so when they overthrew the Shah that the Americans and Brits had foisted on them, they had an embargo directed against the United States. And at the same time, or 7 weeks after this, the Soviets, Iran had been the Americans' shield against Soviet expansion into the Middle East. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and Carter's doctrine, the Carter Doctrine, was a counter-reaction to the events in Afghanistan and Iran. In the past 30 years, U.S. policy has followed Carter's doctrine rather than his conservation plans. with devastating human and environmental consequences. Conservation was the road not taken. Well, I want to come back to Canada's policy.